So we're starting in a supported bridge pose. So you have a blanket flat at the back and you've got your bolster lengthwise, spine-wise in the center, and you've got a wall space to the back, and then a roll. It could be a towel, it could be a blanket. It could be kind of anything that has a little bit of bounce to it, huh? But we're going to work with the prop holding effect here. So what I think of as prop holding effect is really this pose. So we're going to sit on the end of the bolster, especially if you're tall-ish, you do need to be on the end of it. If you're kind of in the realm of more short, then you don't have to worry about that because you just don't need as much of the bolster. Okay, so I'm not worried too much. Now my rear is on that center. It feels like it's on the bolster for certain, but when I rotate not rotate, but when I lean back, I want you to get a feel for a little bit of core mid-chamber sensation. So you've got some grip, not over the neck, but in the middle, okay? And then feel when you bring your legs straight down, if the calves are onto that blanket, I'd rather have you be farther this way to the wall or to the base than too far back, because you can always slide back. So when I lower back, see, I can kind of slide back. My blanket at the base feels like a little roller. Kind of fun. And the prop holding effect is that my bolster is kind of jabbed in my shoulder blade connection and kind of pulling it in. So when you're on your back, what you want to feel is this space at the back, if I can reach to it, that is kind of pinned in and it's squeezing in by the bolster tip. And then your shoulders just barely touch down. This is bare, it's barely touching down. Okay, so probably farther forward to your feet. And then even if you put your feet down and kind of jet yourself back, play with how the prop holding effect is before you get too much into breath defining experience, but feeling that your feet are wide enough on the below you. It doesn't have to be on anything, but below you, that your back muscles are content. And then even if you get that sand on the thigh lids, that upper back likely still needs to work its way so that you're kind of elevating the ribs. Okay, so for me right now, my neck doesn't feel too happy with this. So it's like I'm jutting my chin up. So for whatever reason, I'm gonna roll this tiny bit. Some people will make a roll at their neck. It just depends on how you land in it. It's partially how you're lifted with your bolster. It's partially how the legs extension is created by the moment. So nice to know that you can't really follow every image you see and make it exactly what you think it's going to be when you see it. But once you assert attention into the breathing, you'll fall into the pose. So let's come in to the shape. If you're not certain about the tone of the body, again, use the prop holding effect to give the lift. Spread the arms out. They could be down. They could be straight open. And get a little fussy with the shoulders and their backing. If you're lucky, they just lower down and then you just take off with a breath pace. But sometimes there's fidgeting involved here. Not just in the shoulders, but kind of the hips sway a little side to side. And if possible, let the eyes close and sense the pace of your breath. Relax the legs. Start at the base of your experience, and if you, for any reason, need to get up and reset your props, it's okay. If you need to push the blanket so it's farther down below your ankles, mine just ended up just where it feels supportive for my calves. But steady the awareness of moving breath. Notice that you feel maybe the lower lungs the ribs, the belly, and let the weight of the body sink into the props. And gradually let the stretch expand the breathing muscles. So the best part of this pose is the breathing quality. You can definitely test how your neck is, right? You could move the blanket higher, lower. You feel if your chin moves in, if it moves up. No side to side head rolling on this pose, but get a feel if your elbow situation changes things in the shoulders. It's definitely helpful to work on our chest muscles opening. So feeling the weight of the arms. And a sequence of inhale for a count of 4. And exhale out for a count of 5 to 6. And let's just strive to arrive at a settling sensation on both parts of the breath, both the in-breath and the out-breath. You might be scanning the movement of the breath in the lower abdomen, more than in the ribs on this one. So relaxing the jaw, any throat pressure. And we'll continue to use this gravity, the gravitational kind of flow through the organs. It assists in cleansing, right, and detoxifying, but also just the order of how we work with our organs in the class, right? That's most interesting, is just changing the circulation. Okay, so we'll change it in the breath awareness. And of course, this is like a rib, upper lung sensation here. You know, even though you know your diaphragm's doing its operational duties, it's not necessarily get as much awareness in my abdominal organs here as much as my ribs. But let's all kind of get a feeling of where it could shift. So we'll slide the sand. And if your blanket is rolled a certain way just for this pose, you might want to kind of flatten that out because the roll could be a little disfiguring for the neck coming up here. So I'm just going to let the blanket go into a quarter fold. If you decide, oh, that's too high, I don't want to attempt my neck to get that much curve, you could stay with it flat, but that just depends on how your shoulders feel with it. Sometimes this little bounce of blanket, little lift up, is nice for the shoulders too. So slide the feet in. So I want you to be a little careful of the change so that it's nothing dramatic and quick with the bolster. But I push into my feet, but I also push so that the circulation moves to my upper back. Right, so it's like a bridge pose, right? You have to push into your feet and start to lift the hips. Now, we're going to move the bolster so it's horizontal underneath you, it's across the mat versus straight down the spine. And you might be tempted to roll off of the bolster or something, but see if you can lift up your hips. So remember, this pushes back to the neck a bit. And then you'll turn the bolster and you want to get it underneath you quickly, right? You don't want your back to be tightening up to hold that shape with the feet pushing. So I just kind of slide it under the back and then I eventually shift my knees side to side, try to smooth out my lower back curve. So that if you notice the bolster just kind of fits nicely for the lumbar. It's like a lumbar seat, right? This is the way I should be working my lumbar versus sitting on my sitting bones, but here I am now working on it. So lift up the knees, the feet as well. Knees already up. Add a ball, and we're going to do a couple different simple techniques with the ball, but you'll place it between the knees, and hopefully you can see this one. It's as bright as it's going to be, yellow. Keep giving me brighter. So when the knees go to the side, as you move them over, I want you to try to move the knees also towards the arm. So there's like a length into your back, there's a scoop. And then when you bring the knees back center, see if you can move them downwards. Be careful with your lumbar. And then over to the other side, right, left, and then scoop in towards the upper body. Okay. And now as close as the opportunity is for your hips to move, it might feel like they're added attention as they sway a bit. And it may be like very plain feeling. So simply go side to side. And if you don't end up adding this kind of swoop, that's okay. It might feel too much in your back. Your feet are pretty connected, right? They might be cuddling together. They might be right next to each other. However it ends up happening is probably a good habit for this one. But as you scoop side to side, the back muscles, which are big heaping muscles compared to other parts, you want to find that there's a movement to stretch them, right? So feel that scoop a couple more times. Movement, arms relaxed, a couple more times each side, because it's an easy peasy thing to do. And then as the legs drift back to center, whenever that is, you could keep going for a while. Notice if you can move the knees in towards each other, and if the ball is about ready to pop out, then you might reset it, establish its hold between the knees. But keep it close to have it be with knees versus like thigh muscles. I mean, knee doesn't have like muscle, it's what's around it, but you want to feel that when you push in, its attention in the thigh muscles is kind of all over. It's not really just inner. Yeah, feel what it's like when your feet lift. They don't have to go straight up. I think this is curious for my knee health sometimes. If it doesn't feel good because of the place it's on inside the knee, then you move it a little higher up on the inner thigh. But some of us even that have stuff going on with meniscus or history with that, interesting that when you have the ball on that near the area and you push in, it oftentimes doesn't feel like anything. That's usually our momentum and our leg patterns, like lunge patterns, knee pressure that affects it. But notice that you don't have to be menacing with your knee and push the ball further and further in, but notice the legs light up. Are your legs lighting up? Okay. Keep the squeeze until you feel like, okay, I'm maxed out with squeezing the ball. And then lower the feet towards the buttocks, not to the floor, but towards the buttocks. Feel how the knees respond there, and remove the ball and get a belt. If you're feeling like you're out of sorts here with your blanket under your head, again, you can change it. You can make it lower. You could bulk it up. But be sure you're certainly on that bolster with the pelvis. Okay, you're almost to the other side of it. You're very on top of it. Okay. So now just lift the feet up and just kind of feel, I don't know if any of you have sensation in your knees when your legs are upside down, but sometimes if you're not like at a wall that holds the legs, there can be some sensation around knee with issue. So work with this reversing, obviously it's inflammation that you're feeling, but if that's happening. So I want you to lower the left foot down and then bend the right knee, try to move the knee out to the side, when to the right, when you get the belt under your right foot, and then as the leg lifts, the right one only, assert the belt under that right foot so that you're pulling with the hands. You could bring your hands up, you could slide them down. What's interesting here is that I'm looking to my knee or to my leg piece itself and just trying to get a feel of keeping it straight up. Maybe a little micro bend is best for you. Awareness of hyperextension is a little more often when you're seated with the leg stretching down in front of you or out, or right when you're standing poses. That's the issue with hyperextension more than this version. So you might be okay with working on straight leg, you might. But as that left foot presses and stretches straight down, you've got a blanket, maybe you like that underneath, then you can relax the foot. But as that right leg is drawn back towards you, try to keep the line of circulation very clean in the back of the leg, meaning that you might get farther if you kind of finagle the leg a little bit out and then back center, but let's stay true with the form of movement. Just straight back. If it doesn't go much farther, what do? You might get your hands higher on the belt towards the foot. You might decide that's too aggressive. It's nice to feel the feet in different forms. Right? The left foot passive, the right foot active. And this class is like a drill for your alignment. You're doing alignment drills. Tune-up. Alignment tune-ups. Now feel if you let the right leg kind of go straight up and let hands a little more passive. They're still holding it, but notice if you're capable of creating some tone in the leg with it just lifted up in the belt. You're not being too aggressive with pulling. Okay. Now, if you can just keep that leg on its stand, right, it's straight up to into the belt. I don't know if you have the capacity to feel a little bit of kind of turning of the leg, right? So you're not twisting your leg, but your foot is in the belt and you're trying to get a little bit of turn, like the leg is pivoting in the joint, turning, knee turns to the inside, to the outside, just kind of very subtle. But as you hold onto the belt, make sure the kneecap's facing towards you, as much as you know, patella's towards you. And then reach with the left hand to the belt. And let's feature the sensation and all the side of that right leg. So crossing the right leg to the left, if your foot turns out a little bit, you want to really manage the hips on the bolster. So I would just kind of center the feel of your hips on top of that bolster and then cross the right leg. Not even focused on, oh, does it look like it's going exactly where it needs to be, but how does it feel? If you could do poses sometimes with minimal, like, oh, it has to look this way, but feel that you're experiencing the side of the leg, the structure all the way into the hip fibers. It's not always the most fantastic feeling, but it is kind of nitty gritty, tense places, isn't it? The side. Yeah. Don't go grab a hammer and hit the hip here. Just keep it centered. See if the stretch will help. Push through that foot. See what happens in some of these ligament spans on the front of the leg and the hip flexor fire up when you push. So feel if you do a little micro bend. The leg gets kind of heavy that way. Rib center. Turn your head to the right. Right arm is open. Make sure you're establishing a good hold. If your hand gets so tired and your wrists are fatigued, another way to do this would be to buckle the belt around your ribs. This is a nice homework one where you just kind of hang out. You can put the belt around your ribs, let the leg go side to side, stretch out that connection from the lumbar spine into your hip. Okay, now if your eyes are really open, not sure where to go, notice if you let your eyes close. you can feature reaching through the foot to the left, just sensation. Okay, now bend through that right knee. We're getting quite a bit of hip work today. So when you come back in center, you're going to take the belt off. And what you'll do is you'll have the knees into the, well, actually, let's put our feet down. Scoot yourself to the right side of your bolster. So you're still on it, you know, on the side of the bolster, but you're to the right, the area if you're looking down on that side. I'm not all the way on the edge because I'm lazy and I don't want to push that much further. But if you have a lot of length, you might go a little farther over. There's benefits to being short. Okay, so I place the ball to the side of my left upper. We've done this with our other shapes, but you're gonna just put the ball on the bolster. That's probably it. Next to your left hip. And then I want you to let the knees go left. Okay, so they're not gonna be stacked because you got a pelvis and that's kind of in the way of the stacking ability. Thank goodness you've got a good center of gravity. The knees go left and it's like you're smushing into that ball. If you don't have a ball, what could you use? You could use a wadded towel. You could use a sandbag, that would be good too. It's just kind of an ordeal to get it there. But no sand on the hip for this one. But see if you can get your thigh muscles to just lean over to the left. Okay, and if you're completely not interested in this version, you could go without the ball, let the knees go left. That's fine. Now, just a few moments here. So I smush into that the left side onto the ball. And then when you reach the legs over to the left, I want you to try to straighten the legs out over on that left side. It could be a balance chaos here, but you try to stretch the legs over left. You're probably pinning into your left elbow, like you're gripping. So your work is on keeping the chest open. Pretend you can keep your chest open. It's a workout right into your back muscles. Try to keep the legs bending now. Okay, then come back in center and then scoot your seat back to the center, knees bend, lift up the left foot into the belt, stretch the right leg down to the blanket. Simple, you don't have to be exactly centering your bolster. As long as you're not off of the bolster is fine. So as I hold onto the belt, I'm gripping with my hands, but not trying to grip with my calf, either calf. So relax the foot, just use the belt to stretch it. And feel if you're striving to get the right leg farther down. See if you can just plunk right into center using the prop holding, which is sort of what my awareness was today when I started thinking of this one, the prop holding effect for this first part. Okay, and if you strive to go further, it's okay if you want to pull the leg a little bit more and inspire the hamstring. What might be interesting for some of us that have more hamstring mobility, then our calves feel more stretched. Usually we're a little bit out of balance. So, just feel the weight of that right leg on the ground. This would be a good one to add sand to the right thigh, but didn't think of it first round. So next time I'll remember, maybe. Your belly stretches with the breath. If it feels pretty plain and simple, that's good. Now, if you move the left foot so it's what you feel is straight above your hip, and the pull of the belt is not as significant now when we change. Okay, so the right leg is relaxed. You're taking the belt in, so your right hand holds it. And you might even put your left hand onto your left rib cage. And you're reaching the left foot downwards as you cross it to the right. It doesn't go straight down to the floor. That's unlikely going to occur, but and you don't want to ruin the pose that way. So when you cross it over, if you tend to kind of slack on the foot and it sickles a bit, some feet don't want to be forced into this position. So some of us might push the belt a little bit farther down towards the heel. That to me feels a little better on my ankle versus higher up at the ball of the foot. It's a lot more challenging on the hip, right? You can feel it's not weight bearing, we know that. Okay, that's clear. We're not stepping on our foot, but it's resistance. So part of the bones strength work is creating resistance. So for this moment, it's the resistance of the belt. I suppose this would work with like a Dynaband too, pretty good. Okay, now if your balance is in center, it's kind of there. Okay, notice this one. Now, where we're kind of going with this that we did on the first side. This is eventually where you want to aim the leg reach, okay? So just kind of keep this in awareness. Maybe we can get into it on this side a little different. So bend the left knee, okay? Slip off the belt, get your ball, okay? And let's place it to the outside of to the right hip. I'm gonna just scoot a little bit to the left side of my bolster. Be careful I don't move the bolster side, move my hip that way. But as the ball goes to the right side, right on the bolster. And then, this is a tricky one. And when you lean over to the right, this is working deeper in the fascia. You want to feel like you're kind of pushing into the ball, not like it's just on your side. You're kind of pushing into that, and your left leg could straighten, the right leg could straighten. It might just be left leg, like we did just a moment ago with the belt. You can kind of play with that. And the right thigh, I'm just letting it really push down, really push. And if you're, maybe the ball, this would be a ball popping kind of pose because there's a lot of pressure on it. Okay, so feel when the leg reaches over, or both legs, or maybe you like to keep them bent. Could be. Not so much focus on how perfect the rib cage is, just get a feel of the leg muscles working to help the back and the hips. Especially something a little bit out of the ordinary. Okay, now bring the knees back center, and then we'll roll to our left and push to come up, downwards actually, towards the base. And then let's take a side sage prep here. So let's work our way. We're going to be doing some mid-zone placement with the sand today, and then we're going to work the core in between. So I want you to try to get your sand up on the side today versus the hip bone, unless it just doesn't work for you with the sand on that one. But let's give it a try. So block goes behind the blanket if you use it. If not, don't worry about it. And then we've got the ball and the sand. Okay, now we're going to get back to some sand work. Okay, now feel when you're, if you're kind of laying on your elbow, you get this kind of movement pattern. So I want you to try that for a moment. Try to just lean on your elbow, on your bolster, and then feel how the ribs turn towards the ceiling area. So you're rotating. So you have this range of motion. It's not really shoulder dependent. It might be a little bit if you have some issue pushing down. But when you are working in your middle, I want you to lower down and lean into the bolster now. So your head lowers to the blankets. If you're a little cautious of your neck and you want a little more height, just add it. Roll up the blanket. But let's get our sand so it's on ribs. Okay, if this side angle is too much, you can always pivot. And probably both. I like it lengthened on the side. Yeah, it's kind of fun to feel the pressing, the skin movement, the flush. But the right arm could be on the side, on the bolster, could be overhead to your block. Seems to be what most people might aim for, but The reality is you might be on the left back side of your head. You might be turned so the left side of your head is on the blanket. That seems to be the good place for centering. If you do center better on the back of your head, then you can find that position with yourself kind of rolling the head. But if we can find a still point, so we're centered, the ribs move against the sand, so there's resistance the whole time, both on the in and out breath. Even the out breath, there's this kind of brick on your side that you're about ready to push into on your inhale. So just let gravity flow through the organs in this different way. You know, if the connection from your torso to your neck is feeling a little grippy because there's breath contained in that area. There's fluid exchange, so swallowing, clearing the passage of circulation. Just absorbing the nourishment from the pose. Now, for me, I can feel where there's a little challenge with the sand, right? My in-breath is it kind of chugs along. It's a little stuttered. So let's just feel when we center up for the next few moments. So when we let the sand slide off, and we'll do something that is oh so typical for your Vijnana yoga. You'll come up to sitting on the bolster, sit in Baddha Konasana. So you'll just sit up center. You don't have to move your bolster like that, but just center seated, knees out, feet together, and then feel kind of how the ribs assert upright in this position, right? Without having to lift your arms or just after what you just did. You might notice the right side has a different amount of texture. It might actually feel more down than the left side. Interesting. So interlace the fingers in front of the chest, and then as you move the hands forward, round so that you have a cat spine, chin towards chest. So feel how the back reaches. Okay. And then you'll shift forward with your arms and lift up. So you feel the arch through the spine here. There's different patterns of lift. Feet are just together, knees apart. If you need blocks under the knees, use them. That's fine. Okay, and then take a moment where you rotate to the right and you still stay up. Turn. Okay, try to keep arms lifting. Come back to center and turn to the left. Try to keep that up. Now, if the feet are pushing in deeper, that could happen, so you stay centered. And then come back center. Your eyes could be looking anywhere. Hands come back and you push down to the bolster, slide the feet forward. Now just kind of feel, the coordination in your core body when you do that. It's like the leg bands have this nice feature of reaching there. But when you push into your bolster to sit down in front of it, I want you to let your knees stay in that perked up bend, and you'll grab the back of the legs, and I would actually just grab a hold of them and lean back if you touch the bolster, bonus, and then push through into the hands on the back of the legs. Try to push into those hands to straighten out the legs up towards in front of you, just up. They don't need to go towards the ceiling, but they're lifted. And there's a little bit of core kind of balance to find that, not just this piece of the center body, but the legs as well. I feel my legs get a little tense for this one. Okay, now as you bend through the knees, we'll take one more time of pressing down to the feet, hands on the bolster, sit up to the bolster, feet together, knees apart. And then as you press down into the ankles here, just noticing how much you have to round to be here. Could you stay up a little bit? You maybe need to push back on the bolster so you're very high up on it. But feel if you can lean a little bit forward so that the rib body, it almost kind of sags into this position, but instead of letting it just drop, see if you can contain a little bit of, like you're knitting it together, lifting up. Okay, and then keep that awareness. You tip a little forward. There's the center lift. You could keep your hands onto that. That's way below the sternum, right? You're lifting up into that center piece, right where the ribs intersect. Okay, and then you're going to stretch the feet forward. This will be a quick move. Hands on the bolster, slide down, and then lean back and see if you can stretch your arms forwards and your legs straight up. It may work, it may be a flop. You may flop out of it. Flopping is okay. But as you feel the legs reach in front, feel where the body jams up. It may jam in different areas, but sometimes you get lucky on this one. Good Navasana pose. Now hands hold the legs. Now feel how that could be supportive of your hip flexors. And then just feel when the knees bend, so they're right forward from the feet are forward from the knees, that angle. The abdomen may kind of lift up here. So when you lower down your feet, lift up the chest like you're just working on approaching the sitting position. And then relax your grip on the legs. Turn to your right and the right hip, lean into the right hip and take side sage on this side, of course, the right hip down. However you like your blanket sorted out. And use the ball if it's helpful for the inside of that left leg. It could be inside leg, it could be inside knee. As you lean into that right side, add your sand to the ribs. Yeah, you might have to fuss it a little bit with this. And then reach. Okay, left hand reaches over. So as you reach to that block, feel that right thigh move up towards the bolster. And then I would be most focused on my head relaxing here. And we can always use attention to our alignment with releasing our neck. Right, so arm over, arm on the side, hand to the bolster. Yeah, bolsters are kind of critical for this class, isn't it? Sure, we use it for just everything, huh? We'll call it bolster yoga. Okay, lean, and if you can feel parts of the ribs get heavier into the bolster, that's great. They need several breaths here. Center, nothing to change. Just influencing the breath. Now, when you feel the range of the ribs with the inhale, see if you can start out relaxing that reach with that left hand. And I want you to lower it down so when you slide your sand away, so you can feel the left side is aware the most right now. The left side being. Okay, so kind of keep on that emphasis. So we kind of roll around and see if we can tweak circulation in our body and loosen things up. So it's not about trying to compress and pull the skin tighter, it's sort of like feeling the circulation, the circumstances in it. So when I push down my weight into my seat, okay, then I roll with my ribs to the right. I'm learning how to get up again, okay? And then take a seat on the bolster. Okay, my mind is kind of trying to think about, I want to do this a little differently than I even planned. So we'll do a couple seated poses, then we'll go to the wall and do our twist work, I think. So it's the way I like to do twists, but we don't usually do them that way in this class, but we'll see how it goes across on the screen. So first thing, we're keeping with this left side. So I want you to just place the left foot in front of the right shin. And when you're seated up, use a sandbag on the left thigh, like a hip hugger. It's almost like you're trying to wrap it around you. If you used your belt, you could keep it held on there. But when the waist is centered, it's got this funny weight on the left side, you're gonna pivot. So this is more into leg. So I'm gonna use my ball under my left knee. It feels kind of nice. I'm not worried about how low the knee goes. Some of you might have your knee on the ground, I guess, but I'm backing off on that idea now. So I got some blocks. I thought I did. I'm gonna take them to the right side. And I want you to go so that the left hip is the focus, but you're going to stretch over to the right. So you're reaching your blocks to about, try to go to 2 o'clock on the right side versus too much of the 1. So if I go 1 o'clock, it's a little different than the 2. You have to be careful though. So some of you might feel that little parts of the left side of the spine have too much pull or snag if you go to 2. So you might actually have to go to 1. So take the blocks to the right and just let it sort out where it feels like you can reach. Now, of course, it looks like I got this rounded back pattern. So what I would do is to have the blocks high enough that you're avoiding a real cat spine, right? You're reaching to the right. I know my cat is in the corner listening to that, huh? What's wrong with my cat spine? And now feeling how that length is to that left. I don't know if you can feel a hip getting length. You feel it bunch up with circulation in these poses, but not length. Okay, it's hard not to drop into this, I know, but see if you can get some sense of lift. Okay, now we're going to do a seated spinal spiral. So you come back in center. Your block could be anywhere now. And if you've got the ball, I would just leave it, but I want you to sit, and then as you just rotate on the seat. So you're sitting and you're turning, and you might find that you've seen this kind of thing in some yoga circles, haha. But of a fast kind of turning, kind of whipping around. But just go slow so that when you lean to the leg that you were just working with, you can feel a little weight into that left hip. So you are circulating. Does this make sense? So I'm seated. I'll just change my whole direction here. And I'm rotating, right? So I've got my hands on the bolster, my hands on my legs, probably more what people be comfortable with, and rotating. And my rotation could go spin from the left side, could go from the right side to the left, but you just feel that rotation. And then when you come back in center, feel the shoulders roll back. And then I want you to change the crossing. So you just take right leg forward of left shin, take your sand to the right thigh, okay? And then you'll switch the blocks over to the left side and keep it real simplified, right? So I've got my ball under my right leg. I take my blocks over to the left. And I've got that lift, so it's about 10, 11 o'clock on the left side. And when you lean down, if your sand feels too low on the leg and your knee hurts, then you got to get it higher up because it's only going to put sheer drama into the knee. Yeah, the inside, right? That's going to press. So feel if the sand is too much, you can just go without. Leaning into that left direction, feel that leaning is also a sense of breathe, lift, center, lower. And it might be helpful to let your eyes relax and balance the reach out of the waist. And try to come into that spiral motion from here. So you'll bring your hands to your legs and then just get a feel of moving to the right. And now you have to be a little careful how much you move around in your body because it's probably a little sensitive, right, on that right hip. So when you rotate, keep it high up in the waistband. So you're trying to lift up in the torso versus droop down. We don't want to get droopy. This is not droop sequence. But next time you come back around to the center, we've spent a lot of the class kind of in this pattern of the hips. So what we're going to do is take it all the way the other direction for a bit. So taking the sand away, and you're going to turn, so you're going to the wall. So you want to take your bolster. I think we'll use it in the beginning for our arm. So let's take, so that we're down to, yeah, I think we can go down to one blanket now. You have a blankie under your knees. Make sure it's pretty close to the wall because we usually don't measure that one very well for the wall work. The blanket's usually too far forward. So you'll have your bolster way front, kind of out of reach for the first pose pattern. Just let it be a stretch away to get it. Okay. And then let's take a downward dog. Let's just go right to that. So we'll lift up the knees. A whole different view of your world right now. So you're inverting, right? So you're lifting up the hips, you're changing the gravity in all of it. And if the knees tend to squeeze towards each other, I would take a pretty good step or lift the heels up at the wall so that you can balance the circulation. I like the heels up because it's less drawn in my legs, in my calves, but it's more in my down to my face, right? I can feel the face gets a little more flushed. So you play with that. Also, the wrists get more pressure too. It's not forever, but it still might feel like a long time. Okay. So feel where you push the floor away and then come down to table and bring your hands a little farther forward and come forward with the hips and lift the chest up. So it's not a plank pose, it's an up dog. Notice if when you push forward, your back feels like it pulls in. We really have to work on that. Not that anyone's doing it incorrect at all, but we probably all share some similarities with sensation. So when you come back, notice how it opens up the back. Kind of feel, oh, some more open back. Now, round the back into cat, chin to chest. Try to really feel the chin move in. That's key. So you get that upper spine. Just the spine, not the back muscles, but spine stretch. Okay, now stay with the hips back and up like they are, feet down. Arch the spine. Okay, and feel a way that you can create this where it feels pretty good in the back muscles. Maybe the hands are farther forward, maybe they're closer in. Okay, feel that where you can associate back comfort. Just take some time. Now, some time is over. Now, round the back so you have that lift of the mid back, chin to chest. Okay, now we'll go to up dog. So you'll let the body weight lean down to the hips. Now, kind of feel when you move your head forward, how that changes the pressure in the back. So it's everything's so interconnected that you might go, oh, I'm just not going to go as far forward. Maybe that's better for my back muscles. And then when you come back, I want you to get the bolster. Actually, let's use it like this. Let's turn it. I want to work on back care here. So you'll lay on the bolster. You don't want it too far back to your knees. You want it kind of upper thigh hip support. And when you lower down, feel if you can get the ribs right onto the bolster. Okay, and the arms are going to be a little supportive. So for some of us, that Sphinx pose, elbows down, this feels pretty darn helpful. If I have my hands back, it's a little more risky for the back muscles, especially the spine tension. So find where there's, your risk is that you create a little bit of net strength, but it's not making you grip up your breath. So I think Sphinx pose works good for it right now, but some of you might want to work a little harder and have the hands farther back, elbows bending by your sides for the moments. Right, this isn't going to harm your back, it's just going to be a little bit more strength work. So you might try both of them. Okay, now the feet touch the wall, that's key. So feel where that length is. I don't really feel like it's completely stripped out, right? It's both length in the front. It's pretty easy. And it's a little length in my back. It's a baby back bend. Yeah, even babies do this back bend, right? When they're doing tummy time. Okay, baby cobra. So now when we slide the hands back, elbows try to get straight back versus trying to squeeze them in. Right, that's not what we're aiming for. It's elbows back. Okay, so as you push down, fingers, hands out wide, fingers wide, lift up, straighten the arms, get a feel of straight. Good, that was good. Spine is lifting. I know it feels like it's pushing, arching, but this is spine extension. You got 3 curves, so this is the extension factor. Okay, and then you come back to table, and now we go into some lunge patterns. So I think we should be a little careful of our bolster setting. So I want you to have it easy to get to. So whatever side you want to put it on, I want it there so it's easy to grab a hold of. And then take a block set in front. And at first, when you step your right foot forward, you might start with your knees and hips distance. And that might feel best for your back. And oftentimes it's taught knees together and then step. So, you know, some real classic teaching is knees apart in the step. So I'm going to go classic and just see how it ends up in my hip. So I'm going to step forward. Right. Sometimes I think as yoga has evolved a bit, if you could call it evolving, we've kind of made it, we changed it for a look on how it looks. So kind of go back to some of these basics and see how it works in your hips. But as you lunge forward, feel if that right thigh is striving to pull you, like your right foot is pushing. So you got to be careful the knee doesn't go over for certain the toes, but you don't want to go too far forward the ankle either. So let's get the underbelly of this right leg kind of, I don't want to say overly toned. I want you to get a feel of it pushing down through the foot to wake up the bottom of the right leg, the back of it. So as you lift up the back knee, feel the heel at the wall, the back heel, and stay with that structure of that right knee reaching forwards, just above the ankle, of course. Okay. Can you get your blocks up as high as possible? Not going anymore. And then feel if you can stay steady with the left heel pushing back. Now, if you come up and you notice, if you try to balance it, you feel like your foot's going to slide out from under you. Well, then you need to get a better purchase on your foot, right? You slide your foot a little farther back, as long as the knee isn't jutting over, right? Sometimes that's a little fine line for your balance, isn't it? The knee. So try to really work with the wall, that you're pushing back into the wall. Yeah, this is a good one for that whole tone of hip and back up through the glute into the spine. Such a nice piece of strength, right? So as we simplify and we try to get that inner lift, none of us are having an easy time with this one, I'm sure. Okay, so the hips get this strong resistance. So I want you to get a feel of pushing from that back foot, like pushing forward, and then set your hands on the blocks and steady this emphasis where the back of that underbelly, the right leg, still stays really toned. Okay, step the left foot forward besides the right. Of course, they're now kind of buddies right next to each other. Foot buddies. Okay, bring the arms forward. You'll see part of me, but come stand up so you lift up your arms to the ceiling and feel where the balance is in your heels. And the next place you feel connection is probably way up into your hip. Okay, now swing forward. Okay, so you still have that same leg that you're focused on. You're going to step the left foot back, same leg that you're just lunging into. A lot of work on it. And then stabilize and feel if you can now stretch the left heel back and down. So you reach the heel all the way down, back left heel. So now instead of my heel up, okay, right? Heel is down. It could be up at the wall though. You still could have a little lift, but try to stretch your calf. So the right knee could be bending. The right leg could straighten. I feel like straightening my right leg personally versus too bendy. So I can magnify that circulation in the left calf. Oh, and take advantage of levelizing your hip a little bit. So look back at your upper legs. Of course, one is in front, one's in back, but the hips don't really get to move very much. Just the leg change. But see if you can center your arms right down by the sides and the hips so you feel the right hip a bit. Okay, bend through the right knee. Lower the left to the blanket. Take the bolster across the mat. Walk your right foot over into the knee, moving to the ground to pigeon, and lower the elbows onto your blocks. It could go all the way to the floor, but I'm feeling pretty close to the wall, almost too close for me, but I'm going to work with it so it doesn't advance too much in my hip. So you could push the bolster farther forward so you feel different with your hip balance. But what I find peculiar about this is that I'm not purchased too much into my right thigh. I'm not sagging into it. I'm kind of, or drooping into it. I'm kind of lifted in the middle. So it's pretty spicy on the hip. Okay, so I want you to keep a feel of the balance through the waist. So you're kind of in that Sphinx pose, but adding the legs to it. And if the breath is kind of narrow here, see if you can expand in the ribs, even letting your head lower a bit. And slow breath. You know, as the hands come back to help you create that spine extension, that lift of the ribs, center and up. Yeah, at this point, the practice got a little bit busy, right? So when you do shift out, this is going to be where we come back to either child's pose, down dog pose, cat cow. It's a variation to your needs right now. But when you lift up the back and the knee comes back towards the wall, you might just walk out the bottoms of the feet, kind of alternate bending the knees. You might let your head really tip back and towards the bolster. And what I would prefer if I had a choice between the two sides would be just to put my bolster forward lengthwise and then bring my head to the bolster. So I have a supported down dog with my head on my bolster. Okay, so my heels are a little bit up, the arms are working full time, and I'm pushing the floor away. Yeah, feel the lift of the sitting bones. Breathe. Take a break if you need, lower your knees, come back to child's pose anytime. Remember, that's fine. It's enough work sometimes just to come back to child here. You know, when you lower down your knees and you shift into the lunge mode, we might feel personally Like we need to reach the head down to the ground, stretch the back here. And then when you come towards the crease of the hips, right? So your hips have to kind of have this maximum crease to get the reach of the leg. So just kind of notice how you launch into that. If, you don't really get around on all fours very much, but just kind of get a feel how you move from the hip to the spine. And then knees apart, step the left foot forward, taking blocks, high or low. You decide the height is fine. Sometimes I get used to this mid height because it's easier to keep the balance on the blocks, but here's where you get a little bit tripped up usually is you sway the thigh down, the back thigh. So I want you to try to keep it so it's kind of, it's not too yoga-like, whatever that means. It's very strength-like. So you feel that left foot push down, you lift the back knee, and it's all about kind of getting the bulk of strength into around the joints. So the muscles surrounding the joint with strength. So feel the right heel push back, and then start to build up moment by moment. Remember, you don't want to have this kind of cowering position with your back. You're eventually coming up, and you might find holding your hips, hands on the thigh. Be sure you're not going to slide out. Be careful. But when you feel that reach through that left thigh, if your knee is kind of sensing too much drama, come down on the blocks, right? Get a feel for centering the hips, because what I find when I come up is I tend to kind of sway my hip out, and I'm using parts of my leg that maybe have flexibility but not so much strength. So again, you want to really feel like you're in the strength cycle right now. It's resistance. So it seems like just a lunge, but it could get your heart rate going. Could be a lot of energy into the muscles. Don't drain it all out yet. And legs up the wall is going to feel so good today. Okay, come down to the blocks. Make sure they're high. Get a feel where the heel is behind you. Now, we're not quite to lowering the heel down. We're going to step forward with the right foot. We're going to take a forward bend, but have the blocks in front of you. And feel if you need to bend your knees, it's completely fine. If you want to try to straighten the legs out a little bit, and that feels an opportunity for you. The area of gravity in the belly is likely going downward. So your work is on reaching a little forward. Okay. See if you can secure weight into your feet. Bend your knees, reach your hands off the blocks in front of you. Push down to your feet. Make sure they're not turning out or turning in. They're just parallel. And then push down and just lift up the right amount. So you're reaching with your arms, just straight up with the fingers. Nothing together with the hands apart. 2 legs apart, 2 arms apart. Spine is trying to stay together. And then bring your arms out to the sides. Hands are back. And then bend the knees. So you got airplane wings here. You're lowering down. Hands onto the blocks. Set the blocks back closer underneath your shoulders. And then send the right leg back and lower the heel towards maybe at the wall, maybe to the floor. Just kind of depends on this calf, how it feels. It might be calf-tastic, just fine. Straighten the left leg, you can bend it, straighten it. But be certain your hips are levelized here. Right? So you're not trying to swing the right hip open, nor twisting the left hip. It's centering. Right, no more sides to go. This is good. You're on the second side. Okay, now balance the rhythm of movement in our feet. So we're going to kind of push off the back foot. So the heel lifts, the foot is at the wall, the knee bends in front. And now when you lower the knee, can you move your ribs a little back? Just kind of notice, okay, knee goes down, you move your ribs a little back versus dropping. And then get a bolster, slide it under. Now, if you felt too close to the wall for your last pigeon pose, you might bring the bolster farther forward and kind of push farther out from the wall. But blocks straight forward, away from the foot. Walk your left foot to the right side of your mat. And then you got to be a little careful and also not too convinced that you can drop everything in your left hip. So I try to push off my right foot at the wall and then reach the torso. So this would be my best opportunity right here, is to keep my spine extending, right? So you're not in sleeping pigeon, if you can tolerate it for a bit, right? You're trying to get the spine a little bit to the center, not all the way over left. What spine is left? Lower the elbows to the blocks. Go as low as you feel you're comfortable with. You might even go all the way to the floor. And it might just be the right thing for your hip to go that deep into it. But if the right foot pushes, the waist lengthens. And if you are pressing into those blocks and you get a feel of kind of a lift, it's a little small middle reach out of your waist. Nice to reach out of the torso in this variation. Breathing. And if there's more that you can press into, maybe avoid that in the hip. You don't have to overdo it. Sometimes just on the verge of the fullness of the pose is good. Okay, now that we've kind of approached this midsection a little bit, let's bring our blocks. We're going to stay down. We don't have to come back up. So move the weight into the left hip and then swing the right leg forward and take your blanket, place it kind of where your right foot is, right in front of it. And you'll come into moving back to the wall. So what we'll do is we'll come off of the bolster, okay? Push the bolster right up to the wall, flat. And then place your feet on it, scoot your seat to the bolster, directionally to the wall. And then I'm going to add my blanket. This is too poofy, so flat blanket, if any at all. And I want you get a feel. Maybe you don't need a ball on this one. Now your legs have been working a lot. Maybe it's too much. So if you want to add a ball between the knees, you certainly could. But when you push into the bolster, I want you to get a feel for the underbelly of the leg again. But lift up your hips, okay, and feel a way of getting them balanced. Okay, so lower the spine down. Okay, and then I want you to get a block, and I would do 2 side to side. If you want to stack them both up so they're like this under you, not on your ribs, but underneath you, you could. It's a little intense, but what I'm encouraging you to do is lift your hips and balance out the front of the hip bones by having the blocks side to side on the second setting. And then after you find that setting with the blocks, then you actually try to straighten the legs out. Okay, so I played with this with the 2 block policy, but it's a lot of glute strength to get that lift. It's a lot. So if you want to play with that, you could put your feet at the wall to get that high. I haven't found that that works too good for me. Part of it is your blanket, though. You might have to be a little careful how much bulk you have because it's going to be hard on the neck. So this will work. It actually ultimately feels really good, but if it's too squishy in your back, if you feel compression, it's probably happening. So I would just err on the side, whatever is happening for you right now, to find which of those 2 works for you. Yeah, I was surprised when I was working with that briefly. I just didn't feel like it was the right intensity. It was just too much. So for whatever reason, don't judge it. Your body's letting you know, higher or lower. Now I like the bolster for this to have the feet reach to the wall. So it's kind of like when we started with that angle with the bridge pose. but it's a little more intense in some ways on this one for the hips. So let the hip flexors release. Make sure that you have some footing in the game here. So maybe the ball of the foot presses a little bit, maybe the heel is a little bit off the wall. The key though is that you don't turn your feet out, and that's kind of tough because you can't really see them very well. So likely if you're turning them more in, it's probably straight up. It's tempting for me to lift and look. I'm not going to hurt my neck, but usually that's the case. When you feel like you're pivoting them in, they're actually straight up. So let the arms go straight down towards the wall. Shoulders, just let them be. They don't have to be particularly pressing around, but let the back of your hand relax and the fingers gently curl. And then feeling how the breath vibrates in the lower abdomen into the hips. And if we're lucky, we'll start to work in the final spinal here of moving the breath into the waistband, into the hips, the psoas. And if there's a little clenching in your jaw, your neck, this is a good time to let it go. Now bring the feet to the bolster, knees point up. I want you to press into your feet so that there's a direct circulation into the back of the legs, but up to the point where you know where the blocks are. All right, so the legs might shake a little bit when you get a good deep press. Okay, that's okay. They're responding. And muscles are responding if they're a little bit of a shake. Now lift up the hips just enough to slide the block out, and we'll take a crossover a little different than we've done. We're going to use the bolster where it's at. So I want you to let that scoot a little bit closer to the wall. The blanket could stay low. Let the left leg cross over the right and let the knees go just to the right side. So if you want to use the ball, the sacrum, it works on this one too. You could add a sandbag to the outer left leg. You could just keep it really simple here. And it depends on how the neck feels if you want to change the blanket height. Yeah, this is a good time to make sure you're comfortable in the neck. So I won't strain it if it needs a little more cushion after the last pose, bridge pose, it's a little less usually. You could just bring it a little higher and slide it in. That feels functional for me. Open out the left side of the chest. It's very easy to do that on this one. And feel if you use the sand that you want it propped up on the left hip bone into the leg. And releasing the left hip. And now when you slide the sand away and the ball, if you used either, then when we get ready to switch sides, you want to keep it so there's no real charge of the knee to the chest. Lower the left foot to the bolster. Shift so the pelvis is centered before you cross the right leg over. Right leg crosses over left. And if for any reason this is too much of a deep twist into the knee, you could always take it a little different. You could put a block over on that side, kind of prop up the leg onto the block on that left side now, and add your sand there so it doesn't have to be super twister if you don't like that. If it just is harmful on the knee for you, then you don't do that. You can cross it differently. So from one side to the next, likely however you join the props will have a similarity depending on how you set it from the hip bone to the thigh bone. And then let your head roll to the right and feeling circulation. It doesn't have to look the same as the last side. It could be that you're connecting into your hip. Hip work just feels really good. There's just so much hold up in the hips. So it's nice to release the tension. Part of releasing the tension is feeling the tension. Now, with a few more moments before we go inverted, see if you can get the waist to feel that rotation. And keep in mind, we want our thoracic, our middle vertebral column to get the turning. Strengthens the lungs. Now sliding the ball, then the sand. Keep the sand nearby for legs up. So you want to just wind through the legs. If you need to bring the knees to your chest, it seems reasonable you would do that to get up. You'll roll to the side. And then when you come up to your bolster seat, you want to take the blanket in, and you could have the blanket, your other blanket under your spine too. So you could actually kind of make it interesting if you feel like it. You could take your other blanket straight down the spine. I sometimes like this version. So I got my blanket at the back for my head, knowing that my spine is not this tall, so I'm going to have to kind of change it when I get on my back. I know that, but that's okay. And then when I sit my seat to the wall and I swing the legs up, then I have this like change with this one. It gives a little more lift in my torso. And then, yeah, I don't want that blanket. That doesn't feel good for my neck. So I'm going to go just down to this one, but that's because I'm short, right? Some of you might need a little blanket under your head. I fit right on it. Okay. So sort out your props, right? Maybe you just use the bolster. Maybe you have just that in your little blanket under your head, or maybe your spine. But when you add on your sand, see if you can bypass too much knee compression here. So you've got to feel a little bend, just don't do too much squishing of the knees, and then sort out the feet on the sand. It could take you a while getting it right. And then once it goes right to the wall, it's even better. Right? The balance and down and back into the brain is kind of what we're going for. It's the circulation all the way to the brain. So that's the whole experience that is helpful, is reversing the flow in the body. So if you get the motion of the elbows out and landing and feeling what is still kind of scattered in your bones, right? Is there some place that could use permission to release? And as the eyes relax, if you have an eye pillow, you might put that on. Feel the lift and lower of the belly on the breath. And just feel where there is sensation near the abdominal organs when you breathe. See if you can push that sensation all the way through the abdomen and then settle back into the spine and simply that lower sheath of the back. So feeling how the face has a resting all its own. The jaw, the mouth. And pick up on your awareness that's becoming a little more content. And let's just settle on that. So there's some contentment. Enough to soak up that we truly could use. Now bending through the legs. And just shift your feet. In that moment when they shift off of the wall, could be a learning moment for your muscles that you might really grip up with them. So as you bend through the legs, you could toss your sand over. You could slide it off to the side. And as you get a feel of that curl of the leg bones to satisfy movement, just let the knees go side to side and feeling that there doesn't have to be a pause or a stillness, but there could be just this slow cross angle of movement. And let's roll to a side and help ourselves to sit on our bolster. Take a moment when you're lifting out of the pelvis and the situation internally. So there's environment, there's mental adjustment into the day that's ahead, but feel just that internal moment here of awareness and lift the hands up in front of the chest. They could be pulling in, they could be forward reaching, but find a moment of just gratitude for your practice today, for yourself, for others sharing practice. Inhaling and exhale. Bowing into your heart. Namaste. Okay.